live and we breathe, and we live and we breathe, and we live and we breathe. And some of the time we don't. Tonight I am here and tired, here and awake, sure and alive, yes, here and still here, still and here, and still awake, and still alive.
Yes, we're here and tired of fighting again and again against powers that seek to disenfranchise citizens of these United States. But as radical reformer Lucretia Mott once said,
any great change must expect opposition because it shakes the very foundation of privilege.
we are here and aware to the reality that the right to vote remains as fragile as it is fundamental, and that the vote is a fundamental right of citizenship. We are still here and still alive and singing and commemorating and celebrating those radical reformers who led the way in
stirring up the world to recognize the rights of women.
Susan B. Anthony.
Forget what the world thinks of you stepping out of your place. Think your best thoughts. Speak your best words. Work your best works, looking to your own conscience for approval.
Did I not feel that the time had come for the question of women's wrongs to be laid before the public? Did I not believe that woman herself must do this work? For women alone understand the height, depth, the breadth of her degradation.
Elizabeth Cady Stanton spoke these words in her address to the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention, a groundbreaking gathering of progressive men and women who met to discuss the social, civil, and religious conditions and rights of woman. Stanton was instrumental in drafting the convention's Declaration of Sentiments, with resolutions fashioned after the Declaration of Independence.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. The history of mankind is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations on the part of man toward woman. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
Those facts laid out in the sentiments described gross inequities in women's education, property rights, employment, religion, and in marriage. Upon marrying, a woman merged with her husband and became civilly dead. She had no rights of custody over her own children.
He has endeavored in every way that he could to destroy her confidence in her own powers, to lessen her self-respect, and to make her willing to lead a dependent and abject life.
Over 2 days, the sentiments and resolutions were debated, especially
Resolved, that it is the duty of the women of this country to secure to themselves their sacred right to the elective franchise.
Stanton's insistence on including a resolution demanding the vote was thought too radical by most of those assembled, including Lucretia Mott.
Lizzie, thee will make us ridiculous.
It met great opposition. But with the support of Stanton's friend, the esteemed Frederick Douglass, the demand for suffrage passed. The torch had been lit, a movement begun. Over the following decades, national and regional women's rights conventions were held annually. The circle of women engaged in the debate widened steadily. At the center were Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the new movement's philosopher; Lucretia Mott, its moral force; Lucy Stone, its voice; and Susan Anthony, its organizer.
Our religion, laws, customs are all founded on the belief that woman was made for man.
The world has never yet seen a truly great and virtuous nation, because in the degradation of woman, the very fountains of life are poisoned at their source.
In education, in marriage, in religion, in everything, disappointment is a lot of woman. It shall be the business of my life to deepen this disappointment in every woman's heart until she bows down to it no longer.
Organize, agitate, educate must be our war cry.
Stanton and Anthony's relationship, begun in 1851 and lasting over a half-century, was to become one of the most consequential partnerships in American history. They were collaborators and co-conspirators and confidants and critics. Clashing sisters, Stanton was thought and Anthony action.
I forged the thunderbolts, and she fired them.
Like Mott and Anthony, many of the early advocates for women's rights drew upon their Quaker values upholding gender equality. All of the early advocates for women's rights were also ardent abolitionists. The two causes sprang from the same seeds of moral reform.
Let woman then go on, not asking favors, but claiming as a right the removal of all hindrances to her elevation in the scale of being.
We ask justice. We ask equality. We ask that all civil and political rights that belong to citizens of the United States be guaranteed to us and our daughters forever.
We take our stand on the solidarity of humanity, the oneness of life, and the injustice of all special favoritism, whether of sex, race, country, or condition. If one link of the chain is broken, the chain is broken.
Wrongs
the elective franchise is withheld from one half of its citizens because the word people, by an unparalleled exhibition of lexicon graphical acrobatics, has been turned and twisted to mean all who were shrewd and wise enough to have themselves be born boys instead of girls, or who took the trouble to be born white instead of black.
Now, all we need is to continue to speak the truth fearlessly. And we shall add to our number those who will turn the scale to the side of equal and full justice in all things.
Men, their rights and nothing more. Women, their rights and nothing less.
At the first National Women's Rights Convention after the Civil War, suffrage was the hot topic. A 15th Amendment to the Constitution had been proposed in Congress, establishing voting rights of black male citizens. Stanton and Anthony had lobbied mightily to get the 15th to also outlaw discrimination in voting based on sex as well as on race. They were outraged that women had been shut out of the franchise at this opportune moment. For many years, they had agitated mightily for emancipation. Now, truly, it was the woman's turn for freedom. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, a prominent African-American abolitionist, poet, and suffragist, rose to speak.
We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without the receiving the curse in its own soul.
Harper would have none of the equivalencies being made between women's status and slavery.
You white women speak here of rights. I speak of wrongs. This grand and glorious revolution which has commenced will fail to reach its climax of success until throughout the length and breadth of the American Republic, the nation shall be so colorblind as to know no man by the color of his skin or the curl of its hair. It will then have no privileged class trampling upon and outraging the unprivileged classes, but will then be one great privileged nation whose privilege will be to produce the loftiest manhood and womanhood that humanity can attain.
We are all bound up together. We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity. 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 We are all bound up together. 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 We are all bound up together.
And yet, the 15th Amendment divided the movement. While many continued to support the passage and the goal of universal suffrage, Stanton and Anthony became determined in their belief that women needed their own constitutional amendment.
The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex.
A white woman has only one handicap to overcome, that of sex. I have two, both sex and race. Colored men have only one, that of race. Colored women are the only group in this country who have two heavy handicaps to overcome, that of race as well as that of sex.
Until recently, the story of Black women suffragists had not been told. While there were important figures from the beginning, as the 19th century came to a close, a legion of Black women from both North and South formed women's clubs dedicated to educational uplift and social justice. Led by women such as Mary Church Terrell, more and more Black women joined the cause of women's suffrage.
And so, lifting as we climb, onward and upward we go, struggling and striving, and hoping that the buds and blossoms of our desires will burst into glorious fruition ere long. With courage, born of success achieved in the past, with the keen sense of the responsibility which we shall continue to assume, we look forward to a future large with promise and hope, seeking no favors because of our color, nor patronage because of our needs. We knock at the bar of justice, asking an equal chance.
Sadly, many white suffragists working for the cause did not extend an equal chance to their African American sisters. The National American Women's Suffrage Association, that's the NAWSA, with Anthony at its helm, employed a Southern strategy to appease the segregationists, as it was widely believed that gaining women's suffrage would be impossible without their support. The seeds of distrust planted in this era echoed the strained relationship between white feminists and Black women in the women's rights movement of the 1960s and 70s, and to this present day.
Between the Civil War and the final passage and ratification of the 19th Amendment, 2 more generations of women's rights activists had taken on the fight. Again, there were divisions, this time over strategy. Alice Paul, young, fearless, willing to use new militant tactics, split from the NAWSA and formed the National Women's Party. From parades to picketing the White House to prison time, the NWP gained maximum national publicity for the movement.
Carrie Catt, to whom Susan B. Anthony passed the torch, was every bit the organizer as Anthony, but was wary of radical tactics. She believed in a more diplomatic approach. Ultimately, Alice Paul and Carrie Catt, militancy and diplomacy, both carried the 19th Amendment through to its passage in Congress in 1919. In a dramatic political finale, Tennessee became the required 36th state to ratify it. And on August 18, 1920, the Susan B. Anthony Amendment became the law of the land.
While we rightly celebrate the bold and selfless efforts of the generations of women of all races and backgrounds who fought valiantly for the vote, let us also remember that the 19th Amendment is inherently intertwined with the 15th Amendment and the ongoing struggle for voting rights.
In the decades following the passage of women's suffrage, just as Jim Crow laws and violent threats had kept Black men from exercising their 15th Amendment rights, Black women were routinely turned away from the ballot box. Not until decades later, with passage and renewal of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, were the tools of disenfranchisement finally outlawed. The VRA's mandated federal oversight ensured that state and local governments could not pass laws or policies that deny American citizens the equal right to vote based on race.
On June 25, 2013, the Supreme Court swept away a key provision of this landmark civil rights law in Shelby County versus Holder. That decision has led to a great resurgence in voter suppression laws. What better way to honor the suffrage centennial than to address the ways in which citizens continue to be disenfranchised by voter suppression measures that function much like those from over a century ago?
Voter ID laws.
Closure of polling places forcing long lines.
Misinformation campaigns.
Increased restrictions on early voting.
Purging of voter rolls.
Voting rights are under attack in America. There's a deliberate and systematic attempt to prevent millions of elderly voters, young voters, students, minority, and low-income voters from exercising their constitutional right to engage in the democratic process.
Tonight, we are here and awake. We praise and we protest. And so, let us also celebrate today's reformers and activists.
In Atlanta, the New Georgia Project works with local and national civil rights organizations to defend voting rights and advocate for policies that expand access to voting.
Vote Riders, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, works to educate voters on ensuring that they have the correct form of ID to successfully vote in their state.
Rock the Vote provides guides for voter registration. This nonprofit's mission is to engage and build the political power of young people.
Ahead of the 2020 election, Four Directions, a Native American voting rights advocacy group, plans to work together with tribes to establish formal mailing addresses for voters in North Dakota and elsewhere to ensure that voter ID laws do not hinder Native voters.
As Dolores Huerta once stated, every moment is an organizing opportunity, every person a potential activist, every minute a chance to change the world.
This is the next battle for our democracy, one where all eligible citizens can have their say about the vision we want for our country.
Struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation.
Any great change must expect opposition because it shakes the very foundations of privilege.
All we need is to continue to speak the truth fearlessly, and we shall add to our number those who will turn the scale to the side of equal and full justice in all things.
The way to right the wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them.
Truth is the only safe ground to stand upon.
Failure is impossible.
Life is a hard battle anyway. If we laugh and sing a little as we fight the good fight of freedom, it makes it all go easier. I will not allow my life's light to be determined by the darkness around me.
For